Right. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, which is on financial planning for US expats living or moving to Portugal. And for me, this really is quite a hot topic. Over the last 6 years that I've been working in Portugal and in Spain, we've really struggled to be able to give financial advice to anybody that has a connection to the United States. I'm sure a lot of you will be aware. There's all sorts of difficulties that we have to come from regulation, tax implications, compliance, reporting, various different things that have always made it difficult for us to provide advice to people that are have that US connection. So we've not been able to do it, and it's been very difficult for US expats because they're very much in limbo. You know, you sort of leave the country, the United States. The financial advisory firms there do not want to advise you because you're not in the United States anymore. You come across to Portugal. There's a lot of firms that aren't able to advise you because you're no longer because they don't have the licensing to do so. So it's always been a bit of a minefield. So what we've actually done now is we formed a partnership with LGT Wealth Management, of which Chris is here. Welcome, Chris, to the webinar.
Thanks, Sam. Nice to see everyone.
Yeah, and Chris will be talking in a little bit about LGT, who they are and what they do and that sort of thing, and how they can actually help you. And really partnering with LGT, it means that we're actually now able to provide this advice to people that have the connection to the US. So as I say, Chris will be talking later. If I give you a bit of housekeeping here, my name's Sam Daines. I'm a senior wealth manager here at Holborn Assets. You've got my telephone number down there in the bottom left-hand corner, which is 00447969059122. It is a UK number, but I'm not based in the UK. I'm actually based in our Portugal and our Spanish office. But if you do save that number and you have any questions, please feel free to ring, WhatsApp, or telephone me. You've also got my email address there, which is sam.daines@holbornassets.com. So if you do have any questions that arise from this, then please don't, feel free to drop me a line. If you want to book a free financial review, we're more than happy to do that. I know everybody's situation is incredibly individual. So although we'll be talking generally about US connected people and US expats, obviously you will have your very own specific situation that we can talk through. So make a note of them numbers now. And just to sort of start with regards to Portugal, I'm sure a lot of people watching this will be aware, whether you're in Portugal or whether you're planning to move to Portugal from the United States, there's been a lot of changes over the last year. And that started the beginning of last year with the change to the Portuguese Golden Visa program. Whereas that was a very popular route for people moving into Europe. You'd obtain your golden visa through property. It had a low entry point of around 280,000. But that was withdrawn as of the beginning of last year. So there was a big change around that. And it did make people think a little bit more about how they would make it work moving across to Portugal. You can still do the golden visa program, but you can't now do that through property. You have to do it through investment funds. You have to do it through other means. So again, that was a big change that happened at the beginning of last year. Fast forward towards the end of last year, we had a change in NHR. The Portuguese government announced that NHR would be removed. And if you don't know, NHR, non-habitual residency, is a really preferential tax regime that people living in Portugal can get. And it was a reason, actually, a lot of people would move to Portugal. So the withdrawal of that kind of came a little bit out of the blue. And it did have people kind of scrambling to make the move maybe sooner rather than later because of the benefits it provided. There's a grandfathering period with that. So people that were maybe looking to move last year can still apply, but pretty much the boat is sort of passed on that. So the option's not so much there. So that was another big change. And then if you fast forward a month on from that, the Antonio Costa, the Portuguese Prime Minister, resigned under slightly, let's just say it wasn't explained too well. He had to resign for a number of different reasons. So again, it gave a lot of instability, if you like, to Portugal last year. And it made people think, really, is it the right move for me? So if you add to this, people obviously on this webinar who are US connected, the struggles that you have being a US connected person, then obviously it's really vital that you look at your finances and you make sure that you're prepared for that move. So we'll go through a lot of that today. And if I start off by just talking a little bit through what we're going to do and what we're going to cover, the agenda for today, and then we can bring Chris in. So what we're going to do first of all is I'll give you an introduction to Holborn Assets. So just a little bit really about who we are and what we do. A lot of you probably found us through Portugal.com. We work with Portugal.com to provide advice to their members, their readers. We work with Expat.com as well. We work with Internations, and again, providing financial advice to their subscribers or to their members. It's free advice. You don't need to be a member or subscriber, but that's how a lot of people will find us. Then we'll bring Chris in, and Chris will give you an introduction to LGT Wealth Management in the US. If you've not heard of LGT, I think I remember Chris saying it's probably one of the biggest companies you've never heard of. Is that right, Chris?
Yeah, you're stealing my line, Sam. Yeah, the largest company no one's ever heard of, although it's very big in Europe. So I'll come on to that.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I do remember you saying that, and I did obviously sort of looked into more detail. I know exactly where you're coming from. So Chris would talk around that, a bit about who they are, what they do, and how they can potentially help you if you have that US connection. Talk a little bit about the complexities faced by US individuals. I know a lot of you will be here because you've faced them complexities, and you want to sort of look into more detail around that, and you might already be encountering them if you're in Portugal. A little bit around how portfolios are structured to look at to unique situations as well. As I say, a lot of people watching this may want to sort of speak more individually, but by all means, contact me, make that contact, and we can arrange that. And then we do a question and answers with Chris. And I will say at this point as well, obviously, a lot of questions that we have coming in are tax-based questions. Me and Chris are both not specifically tax advisors. Obviously, getting tax advice as part of any financial plan is absolutely essential, and people that we help through providing advice, we will put them in contact with our partners who provide tax advice. But obviously, if there are any specific tax questions, then we can't answer that ourselves. However, moving forward, we will be able to help with that. So just a little bit about Holborn and who we are and what we do. So Holborn Assets, we were established in 1998, so we've been going around 26 years now, so a long period of time. And we're a British family firm, so still run by the same British family that started it. And we do everything from investments to pensions, insurances, mortgages, residency by investments. We do property as well. So we do the whole holistic approach really to financial planning. We've got over 500 employees around the world now, and they work out of 20 offices, over 20 offices now. So we actually have an office in Portugal. We've got an office in Spain. I'm actually now in Spain this week, and I'm in Portugal next week. So the office in Spain is in the Malaga region. The office in Portugal is in the Algarve region. It's about 4.5 hour drive from office to office, which is a very nice drive via Seville. We look after around 20,000 clients, over 20,000 clients now. We have over 2.5 billion in assets under management. So we have a large amount. We have a lot of experience in advising our clients, and we won numerous industry awards. So there's some listed there at the bottom. That was back in 2022. There were the awards last year. We've won some more awards. A bit like the Oscars, if you like, for financial services, but probably not quite as exciting. We've got an excellent review on Trustpilot as well. So, a lot of our clients, we get them to talk about the experiences with us, and we do try to make it as positive as possible. We put the client first in really everything we're doing. But just talking, I suppose, how we connect before I pass you over to Chris. I mean, for us, we do the financial planning for people. We look at what your objectives are, what you want to do, and we put together a financial plan. But in the background, we need LGT and Chris really to help us to make this advice compliant and to put the right investment structure in place. And this really is what puts Chris and LGT in front of you. And obviously, Chris now can give us a bit of information about LGT. So let me pass over to you, Chris. While I'm introducing you, I will change the slide while you're doing that. There we go. Yes, so Chris, over to you, and I'll bring up your slide here.
Lovely. Look, thank you very much, Sam. As Sam said, I work for a company called LGT. I've been with LGT for 13 years, but specifically working with US connected people since 2015. Sam mentioned that LGT are sort of the largest firm that no one's ever heard of. They I do always joke about that, but they're absolutely massive in size. If you go to sort of Zurich Airport or Vienna Airport, you'll see all of their signage across the airport. So much like you'll see sort of Citi or JP Morgan out in the States, or HSBC in the UK, you'll see their signage there. So they're absolutely massive. They've got 5,000 employees worldwide, across 25 locations, and they manage, or we manage as a firm, 270 billion of assets, across sort of Asia, Europe, and the States as well. As I say, I've been with LGT for a long time now, but my day-to-day job is to work with US individuals. We established an SEC regulated firm back in 2012. It was following a piece of legislation called FATCA. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of it or stumbled across that acronym. It's not always the best acronym to stumble across for US taxpayers. And really what happened was a lot of non-US wealth management firms or banks sort of pulled away from providing financial advice to US individuals. I should say at this point that I'm based in Europe. I'm based in the UK. I travel across to Europe fairly regularly, and also across to the States to see clients and advisors too. But we're based in London, and predominantly we originally worked with sort of US taxpayers. What I mean by that is either green card holders or US citizens that resided in the UK, and effectively it's all down to sort of making the sort of underlying investments work for a US taxpayer. So we saw a lot of success with that, and we still work with many sort of UK resident individuals. But as the business has grown and we've grown in size and assets, we've sort of ventured out to Europe to sort of assist any European residents that are US connected in some way. As I say, look, what we try and do is along with Sam, we try and fit all the pieces of the puzzle together. And our piece, in terms of my piece, is the investment side of things. So a lot of what I do is very much tax connected. And what we've seen is with the US effectively taxing their individuals in a slightly different way to most countries anyway. Historically, it was only a few countries that taxed it in the same way, and it was the US, North Korea, and Eritrea. So not particularly popular in the way they tax their individuals. Effectively, it's based on citizenship. So you can live wherever you want in the world, but you're effectively still a US taxpayer. Now that creates a little bit of difficulty often, because the two tax codes, wherever you are, so either in Spain or Portugal, they don't always marry up and connect very well to the US tax code. Now, that can affect everything from sort of all of the planning work that Sam does, but also the investment side of things, and rather sort of common approaches to sort of investing, that it doesn't always work. So very simply, any sort of non-US based fund doesn't typically work well for a US taxpayer, and really that's where we come in order to sort of assist clients and making sure that you don't fall foul of any SEC rules or IRS rules. We all know that they can be quite aggressive in terms of how they get in contact with clients, but also the sort of potential fines and penalties that they can levy on clients as well. So we, in terms of our sort of typical client, it's all US connected, so they are all US taxpayers. We've got vast amount of experience with US tax, and they can have US accounts in the States, so US domestic accounts, whether that be sort of a retirement account, be it an IRA or a Roth account or a brokerage account, or a sort of general investment account over in Portugal or anywhere else in the world. That's where we typically can come in and provide advice and make sure that not only that we're fulfilling our duty to make sure that the US tax is considered, but obviously also to make sure that you are reaching your long-term goals, whether that's to provide an income in retirement or to grow your portfolio for retirement. That's hopefully where we can come in and meet those objectives. Other sort of types of accounts, well, it's sort of, any other sort of pensions. So we work, with UK pensions, obviously, but typically it's a normal general investment accounts. Now, I've seen one of the questions already, so I can already answer this one. We do have platforms over in the States. So we have our own platform in the US where we manage assets within brokerage accounts. So there is no need to necessarily, if you are moving to Spain, Portugal, or anywhere outside of the US, there's no need to sort of move your assets away from the States. That being said, we see a lot of clients that like to do that. Now, the benefits of that is obviously, a lot of US banks will no longer look after individuals as soon as they change their address to a non-US address. But also a benefit of doing such a thing is to add some local currency to your investments. We often see, myself and Sam, clients with, come across from the US with, a lovely sum of dollars, and all of their investments are very much dollar centric. But ultimately you're living and breathing in potentially euros or pounds or whatever it is. And you might want to take a draw in Europe. So having some of your assets based in Europe can add a benefit for that. We also have platforms in London and Jersey. I know Jersey is sort of a bit of a no jurisdiction for Portuguese taxation, but we do have optionality there. And the important thing to note is really adding those euros or other non-US dollar currency to your portfolios. So just sort of a bit about the portfolios. Obviously, we're based in London, but we are globally. We've got a global outlook. So we do have a lot of exposure to US equities. We've got a lot of exposure to European equities and Asian equities. We don't just look at the S&P. We try and sort of diversify your clients' assets outside of the US. Again, it sort of goes back in terms of, right, okay, you may sort of be from the US and very much sort of, pay your taxes in the US, but also, you do have to consider your local residency. So that's where we will add in sort of, any sort of European equities or Asian equities as well. So we typically manage on a sort of model portfolio basis. So myself and Sam will go through a sort of risk profile questionnaire, and that sort of go through that with US clients, and effectively pick a portfolio that will suit your needs and long-term objectives the best. The other thing we can offer is sort of bespoke portfolio servicing and sustainable portfolios. So something that we've seen over the past few years is really an introduction and increase in clients wanting sustainable or impact portfolios, where it's not only just avoiding the sort of negative sectors such as tobacco or alcohol or fossil fuels. It's selecting investments that will really make an impact going forward. And that's what we can introduce to client portfolios as well. So that's sort of a little bit about sort of how we manage clients. Obviously, there's two sort of critical points. One is meeting your long-term objectives, whatever that may be. It may be capital preservation, it may be to provide an income, it may be to sort of reach for the stars and grow your portfolio for retirement. So that's one key point that we look to do. But the second key point is to make sure that the IRS aren't sort of looking at client portfolios and sort of taxing them aggressively in the future. As you'd expect with sort of any sort of bank or wealth management house, we do have a portal where clients can log on and view their accounts, as well as sort of hosting webinars alongside Holborn and Sam, and we also send out regular commentaries as well. At this point, Sam, I believe there may be a few questions to run through. You may have some questions for me as well.
Well, I will put you on the spot. Yeah, I mean, if I go through the questions, a good way of sort of talking through it all. Let me just get them here, and then we can go through them. So, as I say, I know some of these will touch upon the tax a little bit, so I know we're going to be careful with that. But let me just sort of go through as the ones we had coming in. The first question was, Chris, how to transfer US stocks with minimal tax implications?
Good. Well, look, it's relatively easy actually. With a lot of listed equities or listed fixed income bonds, funds, you can transfer them to most countries, to most platforms around the world, really. So what we typically want to do is something called an in-specie transfer. Now, what I mean by that is effectively moving the assets in your name over to a new account wherever it is. It might be based in Europe, it might stay in the States, but effectively what that means is you aren't crystallizing any tax. You don't have to liquidate your portfolio. You can just move it across. We may at that point say, right, okay, actually you may want to liquidate your portfolio or sort of sell down some or keep some certain stocks. But yeah, there's always options in terms of sort of mitigating any tax at source.
Okay, interesting. Obviously, we get a few questions on this. So how are 401ks and non-Roth IRA withdrawals taxed for USA citizens with Portuguese residency? It's the tax word again, so I know we're going to be careful. But
it's exactly. And this is where I'm going to caveat, Sam. We're not tax advisors. We're very much tax aware, but and look, I can answer this question, but I would double check. I would double check with your with any of your tax advisors. So typically, I said that the US taxes its individuals on citizenship, but there are dual taxation agreements between the US and other countries. So Portugal and the USA have a dual taxation agreement, which effectively means that if you're a Portuguese tax resident, that will be your primary rate of tax. So any income taken from a 401k will be taxed in Portugal. The benefit, one of the benefits of sort of our US platform is we make sure there's no withholding tax kept in the US. If you utilize sort of any of the major platforms in the States, of Fidelity, or Vanguard, whoever it is, they will apply a withholding tax at source. You've got to remember that they're sort of 99.9% of their clients are US taxpayers, US tax residents, and actually for them they don't mind 10% being held at source, but for Portuguese residents or Spanish residents, clearly you want to pay, you want your income being paid gross of any tax. So we can ensure that as well. Now, how they're actually taxed. So it's down to Portuguese law, obviously, with the NHR sort of still being in place for the time being. I believe it's sort of 10%. Going forward, obviously, it's down to sort of how Portugal taxes their individuals anyway. With a Roth IRA, obviously slightly different with a traditional IRA or a 401k. With a Roth IRA, actually, there shouldn't be any tax on any withdrawals, because effectively the sort of the investments going into your Roth account have already been taxed. So actually that should be absolutely fine to take any draws from. The main one to consider is obviously your 401k or IRA.
Very useful. Okay, yeah, thanks for that, Chris. Next one's a bit of a general question here. So as a US passport holder who has just moved to Portugal, how do I do my annual reporting? Good
question. So what you're after is effectively a US tax report for all of your investments. So it's fairly common to have that, but you need quite a lot more information than your typical sort of tax report. You need things like if your account is outside of the States, you need your highest balance for the year for your FBAR reporting. you'll need sort of long-term capital gains and short-term capital gains for the US tax. You'll need foreign sourced income information versus US sourced income information. Ultimately, a sort of a good platform should be able to provide that reporting for you. We provide it on obviously on an annual basis. We're sending our tax reports out very, very shortly. This is recorded in early February, I should say. So yeah, sort of by sort of mid-Feb, our tax reports go out. But what you also need is sort of a European-based report as well to fulfill any sort of well, again, I'm going to use Portugal or Spain as an example. You know, you obviously need to declare any assets to those or any income to those jurisdictions as well. So you're after that. Our reports fulfill all the requirements for filing your tax return, but we don't actually do the tax return. We don't file your tax return. That's up to an accountant, but we would provide all of that information for you.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks, Chris. So next one, what if any tax benefits are there to living in Portugal for a US citizen with a pension and or social security?
Good. Yeah, exactly. Well, look, it's all as you alluded to earlier on, sort of, you know, there's been a lot of change over the last several years. I guess, look, you know, we'll talk about right now, and actually that sort of, you know, the tax benefits of coming to Portugal right now are very high compared to the States. You know, pension income in Portugal is sort of, you know, can be 10% versus in the US it can be a lot more. So that can be fairly beneficial, clearly. In terms of Social Security, well, there's you still can you know, apply for Social Security payments. You know, there's a specialist team that work with international clients as part of sort of the Social Security team. And, you know, they aren't going to restrict you from getting those payments when you reach retirement. So that there's nothing to worry about there. With Social Security, it's slightly different. They are going to be taxed primarily in the States. There'll typically be a withholding tax in the States at source for a Social Security. But you do still get your Social Security payments, and there's not going to be any additional tax, put it that way, over, you know, living in the US versus living in Portugal. I think the main benefit is probably down to, you know, draws from other pensions, whether it's a 401k or an IRA. That's where it's going to be more beneficial potentially for Portuguese residents.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And I think you might have answered the next question in terms of, would I need to transfer funds to Portugal, and what would be the best way to do this? You touched upon that before, is that right, Chris?
Yeah, so just to comment on that again, so, you know, you can leave your assets in the States. It's no issue at all. Obviously, the one thing you've got to watch out for is typically most whether it's platforms or banks or wealth managers or brokerage houses won't often work with non-US residents. You know, speaking to them previously, it was down to sort of complying with European regulations, European financial regulations such as MiFID, which, you know, to be fair to the Fidelities of this world and the Wells Fargos of this world, you know, why would they comply with a European regulation when, you know, most of their clients are in the States? So you've got to be careful of that. Obviously, you know, with a lot of European wealth managers, they'll have US platforms that you can keep your assets on, but you can also bring them across to Europe. And I mentioned sort of the benefits of doing that earlier on, sort of anywhere sort of in Europe. But again, firms are sort of few and far between, but there's a few in London, obviously, including LGT.
Perfect. And another one here on the taxation. Is there any special taxation for seniors age 65 and over that you know of, Chris?
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad you added that last point there. I'm not aware of any. I'm not aware of any, but I would imagine it will be down to sort of the local taxation. Obviously, in the States, there's no real difference in terms of age where you can, and where you are sort of subject to taxation. So yeah, I would imagine that the only benefits might be local sort of jurisdictions.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, thank you. And this was quite a general question, Chris. I live in Portugal, originally from the US, and manage my own investments, currently held in the US. So, what is the benefit of moving this? Which obviously, I suppose, is why we're here. But yeah, what's the benefit?
Exactly. I would love to say to you right now, we're going to outperform the market by 20% per year, every year until retirement. But no, realistically, look, sort of, we have seen very, very good performance over the past several years. But really, the real benefit is actually the reason why myself and Sam are here. We put clients first. We really do put the client at the forefront of sort of any advice that we do. Other than that, I mentioned appropriate investments. What you don't want to do is any sort of US investments, whether that's sort of US funds, mutual funds, fall foul of any local taxation. So where I am here in the UK, and there are other jurisdictions in Europe, sort of any US mutual fund held outside of a pension wrapper, they're going to be taxed at quite an aggressive way in terms of any capital gains are going to be taxed to income rates, which can be a lot higher than typical capital gains tax. So it's things like that you really want to avoid. We've spoken about tax reporting. You need obviously a US tax report, but you're also going to sort of require a European-based tax report. It's going to have a lot of the similar information, but it's going to be in euros. Your European tax advisor is going to understand it. It's going to be in the local language, which, again, quite frankly, a US bank, a US brokerage house aren't going to be able to provide for you, unfortunately. Any sort of regulation change. Again, so I mentioned that US banks aren't going to sort of comply with European regulation. Well, obviously, as it's sort of European-based firm, I'm not going to mention what happened back in 2017, but we are very much still a European-based country and firm. Look, we have to comply with EU rules, and we have to make sure that your investments are complying, and your overall plan complies with EU rules as well. And finally, I guess it's just peace of mind. I see a lot of clients come to me, and we see clients where they've been investment managers, they've been hedge fund managers, they've worked in banks, they're very, very experienced, but quite frankly, they've had enough of it. And they just want someone else to look after their plans, their investments for them in the future. And we see that very, very often. And it's just providing that sort of peace of mind and making sure that, okay, if they're on holiday, they might miss a piece of news that might cost them some money. Well, that's where we come in. Our teams are quite large, so even if we are on holiday at the same time, there's always someone to pick up where we're away.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. So next one, what type of investments for US clients can and can't you look at? So is there any type of investments really you can't touch, you can't look at, or is it everything?
So the only we can pretty much look after or advise on most assets. There are some sort of very, very much US specific assets that sometimes aren't sort of worthwhile holding for a non-US resident. So something like a municipal bond, which is very, very tax efficient in the States, but actually as soon as you aren't a US sort of tax resident, there's not really the incentive or the benefit of holding those municipal bonds. Other things, sort of annuity based type structures, we personally couldn't advise on, but we know people that can, if that's what an individual is after. But yeah, pretty much most plans we've seen, as I said, we've got a good team at LGT that have got a vast amount of experience working with US individuals. We've got 5 actual Americans on the team that have come across from the US So they've sort of lived and breathed to sort of, you know, the migration across as well. So we've got good experience there as well. But yeah, in terms of the type of investments, you know, it's one of those ones where we're more than happy to take a look at your plan. Ask you know, if you've got any questions, then let us know, and then, you know, Sam and I can get back to you with, you know, whether it's a yes, perfectly, we can look after it, or no, that's not appropriate for you as a Portuguese resident. We can take a look on a case by case basis for sure.
Yeah, perfect. I've come across this question a few times actually. Is my USA Social Security taxed in Portugal?
Yeah, so it's a difficult one. It will be taxed at source in the US, your Social Security, and it's typically about 85%. Again, it depends on the individual. It depends when you start drawing your Social Security, but approximately 85% of the Social Security payment is taxed, and it's most likely going to be taxed in the US at source. Now, what will happen is you'll get a tax credit in Portugal, so it won't mean that you'll be double taxed. As I said, there's a double taxation agreement with pretty much most jurisdictions in the US now. So it doesn't mean you're going to be taxed in both countries. It just means that you'll pay tax in the US, and then you'll have to effectively say to the Portuguese tax authorities, I've already paid tax on that income. You don't have to tax me. And it is very, very common to do such a thing.
Right. Okay, that's brilliant. Okay, so can we keep mutual funds in IRAs in the US and automatically reinvest the dividends?
You can, yeah, very easily. So again, sort of a mutual fund is it's very, very common out in the States, and they're held widely. You can hold them in an IRA, no problem at all. And I believe you can effectively just select on those mutual funds to reinvest any dividends back into the fund. That's no problem at all.
Oh, perfect. Okay, straightforward. So the final one, this is the ones we had in. We are US connected people living in Portugal, but may move to Spain or Malta next year. Can we look at our options now to prepare for this?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Look, you know, I'm sure, you know, myself and Sam always probably say the same thing. You know, it's always good to sort of prepare in advance for a move, whether that's a move from the States over to Portugal or Spain, because the last thing you want to do when you arrive in Europe or a new country is to think about your financial plans. It can be too late, but two, really what you want to be concentrating on is sort of moving in and unpacking and all of that lovely stuff when you're moving to a new country.
Yeah.
You don't particularly want to be, you know, speaking to your financial advisors as nice as Sam is. It's probably, you know, probably not priority list. Top of your priority list. So yeah, look, I would, you know, it's never too early to plan for a move. But you know, ultimately you want to do it at least, you know, probably at least a few months prior to moving to Europe. And in this particular case, look, you know, absolutely in terms of Europe, it's pretty transparent in terms of the tax side of things. We can work with pretty much any client, whether they reside or where they reside in Europe. There are obviously no-go zones. North Korea springs to mind, and Russia at the moment for obvious reasons. So Europe, you know, I'm sure there's no problem at all. But again, look, you know, pick up the phone or drop Sam an email. Just say, right, okay, this is what I plan to do, and Sam can say, right, okay, we need to sort of loop in a tax advisor at this point, or an investment advisor, etc.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And well, that was the questions we had through, Chris. I think you've answered them really well, particularly as there are some tax-based questions there. So it is useful just to touch upon that, because as we say, it does go hand in hand, and you do need to know about it. But obviously it's such a specific area, and we're going to be very careful in what we say. But I think that's really, really useful. But what we will do, and yeah, thanks for that, Chris. What we're going to do is after this, we'll send out a copy of the webinar tomorrow to everyone that's attended. So everyone can actually have a look through that. Obviously, people can contact me if you want to look at their sort of individual circumstances. If you've got any questions, obviously I can run them past you, Chris. If there's anything I don't know, and obviously even if it's tax-based, we can see what we can find out for you. But I think, as I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of this is can be very specific to yourself and your own situation. And this is why we really do encourage you to get in contact. We can do a free financial review. I can sit down with you, look at what your current situation is, speak with Chris, put together a plan for you, and then we can look whether you're moving to Portugal now or in the future, or you're already there. We can look at all the situations there. So yeah, really appreciate that. Is there anything else you want to add? Is there?
No, look, I just echo your points there. Look, we've pretty much come across most scenarios previously, so it's, you know, it's no stress for us to get back to you, and we can get back to you pretty quickly with most answers. And if you need something very, very specific, we've got sort of networks of people that we can leverage off as well. Yeah,
perfect. Well, thank you so much, Chris. Really appreciate you joining us. It's some real useful information there as well. And as I say, we'll send a copy of this out to everyone. We'll also put it on Holborn website as well, so people can sort of revisit there if there's any questions that they want to go back and look at again. But yeah, thanks so much, Chris. Really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll be in contact and we'll let you know any feedback that we get.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sam. Thanks all.
No worries. Thank you, everyone. Take care.